Is there a better way of looking at political ideas than right or left? Because there's nothing innately conservative about the right or innately liberal about the left. In fact, the directional terms come from the seating arrangement of European parliaments, in which conservatives favored retaining the monarchy, while liberals were in favor of people's power. So the typical line model used to describe political ideas as right and left is just a seating arrangement, yet we've come to think of this line as a spectrum. We tend to think of the far ends as extreme, assuming there's some virtue in being balanced in the middle. We refer to our nation as center-right, just a little more conservative than exactly center.
But what are the extremes? Do we assume communism or socialism at the extreme left and fascism at the extreme right? That can't be right, because communism and fascism are both totalitarian statist tyrannies, just slightly different flavors. Nazi means National Socialist Party, and the communist Soviet Union's name was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So if Nazis and communists aren't diametric opposites, then what are the logical extremes? How about total government control or tyranny versus total lack of government control or anarchy? That's better. Then freedom is that perfect balance in the middle.
But wait, there's a problem with this model. It's common in history for people suffering in anarchy to turn for relief to total government control, anything for security. But in this model, as a people move to the left, they have to pass through that balanced freedom section. You'd think that it would be very common for someone to stop and say, hey, this freedom is good. Let's stop going leftward and stay here. But that pretty much never happens. But going from chaos to state control is common. Plus, notice that there's not that much difference between the tyranny of the state and the tyranny of anarchy. Total government control means the state has all the power. The police, the military, the state can do what it wants, and the mere citizen is without any rights except what the state decides to grant. Anarchy, on the other hand, means that the power belongs to whomever is stronger and meaner than the next guy. If you threaten to beat people up or kill them if they don't give you all their belongings, and you're strong enough to mean it, then you have power. If someone else is stronger or better armed than you are, then you have to yield power to them. In other words, anarchy, while less organized, is power in the hands of the strongest and best armed, just like a tyrannical government. So maybe government tyranny and anarchic tyranny are pretty close to the same thing. So tyranny and freedom are really the opposite extremes. Not bad, but it puts all those different kinds of tyrannies in the same location, and maybe there are differences. This simple line doesn't give us the dimensions we need. So what if we use 3 dimensions? A sphere. If we draw a line at the equator, we can separate freedom in the northern hemisphere from tyranny in the southern hemisphere. And then we can draw a longitudinal dividing line with more local interests in the Western Hemisphere and larger interests from state to nation to international in the Eastern Hemisphere. We call this the spherical model. Represented graphically, it would look like this: freedom in the north, tyranny in the south. The most westward longitudinal line is individual and family. Next would come community and town. Then comes county, state and province next, nation, region and continent, and finally world. Down here in the south, you can see that one side of tyranny is the chaos of anarchy, and the other side is the totalitarian control of government tyranny. It's easy to get from one to the other, which is what much of world history has shown us. You can have communism, socialism, and fascism, as separate points in their quarter sphere, based on how much control they exert on their people in the southern direction, or how far they plan to expand toward the eastern extreme of world domination. Up in the freedom zone, location is mostly a matter of whose interest. Free people don't yield power to a governing authority beyond the appropriate interest. Families make their own decisions about the care, upbringing, and education of their children. Communities, on up to cities and counties, decide on local law enforcement and protection needs. States or provinces deal with their particular infrastructure and laws. Only very limited powers would be granted to a nation, as are enumerated in the U.S. Constitution, and that sovereignty would never yield to an international power, but would cooperate with other free sovereignties concerning international issues. If we identify ideologies according to the level of control exerted onto free people and also their level of interest, we can identify location on the sphere, and that will tell us how close we are to thriving in the freedom zone up here above the 45th parallel. We can use the spherical model again for economic ideas. The North will be free enterprise, and the South will be controlled economy. Those differences have direct relationships with political ideologies, so we can overlay the economic sphere right over the political sphere and see how things interrelate. Graphically, it would look like this, with free enterprise leading to prosperity in the North and controlled economy leading to poverty in the South. The East-West orientations are the same as in the political sphere. And what about social ideologies? Again, we can use the same sphere. The North will be civilization and the South will be savagery. You can picture it like this, with civilization in the North, savagery in the South, and the East-West orientations are the same as with the other two spheres. Let's define civilization in a specific way. Families remain intact and thriving. Neighbors and neighboring entities live among one another in peace. Free enterprise thrives and poverty becomes meaningless. Creativity abounds. People generally self-restrain, but when they don't, laws and appropriate authorities deal with the lawbreakers in fair and predictable ways. Savagery is exemplified by broken families, strife, poverty, cruelty, lack of progress, and unpredictable and unfair enforcement of arbitrary rules. That's just what you see in organized crime, gangs, and tribal warfare in the Southwest Anarchy Quarter Sphere, and in the various flavors of totalitarian regimes in the Southeast Quarter Sphere. So the civilization social sphere overlays the other two. In fact, if we can identify the formula for civilization, we're set up to spread freedom and free enterprise in the interrelated spheres. The question becomes then not which is better, left or right, but what are the principles of civilization, which then allow for freedom and prosperity? There's no too far north extreme. There's only getting north enough and doing what it takes to stay there, generation after generation, without southward slipping.